Indiana Jones, Indiana. It's a podcast about Indiana Jones. Every movie, 1 minute at a time. Indiana Jones Minute.
Welcome back to the Indiana Jones Minute, the podcast in which we celebrate and discuss the film Raiders of the Lost Ark 1 minute at a time. I'm Tom Taylor.
I'm Pete Mummert.
I'm Christy Porter.
Yeah, it turns out Jer wasn't kidding. He didn't come back. He was too disgusted by Indy's actions yesterday. But luckily, yes, Christy's here to take his place. And also, we are joined again by our friends from the Alien Minute podcast, John and Mitch. Welcome back, guys.
It's great to be
Thanks
here.
for having us back. Look forward to surveying this minute with you.
Speaking of this minute, minute 57 begins with Indy doing what he loves most, ditching Marion, and it ends with Belloc philosophizing. Who knows?
Well, we were talking a little bit about how Indy's he's not the greatest boyfriend to Marion, and what I think what he does here, seemingly to me, is he rationalizes in order to rationalize his narcissistic choice he's making of leaving her there. He rationalizes that she must think that getting the Ark is just as important as he does, because he looks at her and he says, I found the Ark, it's here. And for a moment she's like, it's here? Okay, cool, let's go. I'll go get it with you. And he knows that that's trouble that would throw a little wrench into his plan. So he ties her back up and he's like, hey, I'll get it. And we'll get, I can't remember the exact line, but he seems to be thinking, oh, she'll be cool with this. And I don't think he's fully convinced of it, but he's at least using it to rationalize his choice here by saying, I'll get it and I'll be right back for you. And you're going to be fine with that, right?
I hate to do this. He doesn't hate to do it, but he says that I hate to do this. If you don't sit still and be quiet, the whole thing's going to be shot. I'll come back and get you.
He puts it all on her.
That's some malice right there.
Right.
So
But he doesn't deliver it that way.
No, he's good at playing her like a piano. Although she's not buying that at all, though. Although it's interesting because I think, as you say that, as you describe the scene that way, I think that I always fully accepted that she was just as excited about finding the Ark as he was. And maybe she is, but that doesn't mean she's like, oh, okay, for the sake of your search for the Ark, I will stay here tied up and please put my gag back in and ditch me. Thank you.
Well,
Maybe
I think
Belloc will finally get lucky.
Unlike Indy, she relishes her life more than the Ark. I mean, we see as this movie goes on, Indy's clearly willing to risk it all just to get this Ark, and I don't think she's there at all. If they can find it, dig it up, and get it out of there, sure, she's on board.
Yeah.
But obviously she wants to get untied and taken out of this state of imprisonment she's in.
But you think that Indy thinks that she is into it.
I think he at least rationalizes the situation to that. I'm not sure if at the end of the day he's fully convinced of it, but he convinces himself just enough to make this choice.
It works for him.
And then and expect it to be excused.
Right.
So,
I think you're right. I think you're right. That's some self-delusion there. Woo.
yeah. I think Indy's a troubled guy. I think when she says, "Are you crazy?" I think that's a good question. I think we said that already, but just to bring that back, I think it's a good question. He's at least psychologically complex, to be kind.
Yeah, Jared keeps bringing back the idea that Indy is just gold lust crazy, and that he's often not in his right mind when he gets around stuff like this. And I think that might be kind of true. I think that I haven't always been on board with that idea. I want to think of him as the kind of sober, reasoned professor of archaeology who wants to find this stuff for the sake of history and science. And
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Well,
I mean,
last night, Mitch and I watched Raiders last night to prep for the show. And one of the things, I'll let Mitch take this one, but one of the things he mentioned was how much like Humphrey Bogart in Treasures of Sierra Madre Indy is, and that's exactly what that character is about. Mitch, I don't know if you want to.
Well, just that I remember reading interview, I think, early on, around the time that the movie came out, where Spielberg said straight up that he was a combination of Fred C. Dobbs and James Bond.
Yeah.
So that was clearly built into his construction. I mean, he's not as much of an anti-hero, obviously, as Fred C. Dobbs, but he's got it bad. He's got the fever.
Yeah. And again, I think it's the charisma of Harrison Ford that kind of makes that a little more palatable. Like, Humphrey Bogart, you're on his side for like the first half of that movie, but then when he starts to go nuts, you're like,
yeah,
forget it. This guy needs a shave.
He goes full crazy.
Yeah.
It's not subtle.
No, not at all.
Since we're speaking of the unconscious, I wanted to mention one other thing about the audience unconscious reaction, which I think that once we see that Marion's alive and we know that she's been fake killed off once, we know that's not going to happen again. And I think in a way, we think now it's for real. Things could be much more dangerous for her because they're not going to pull that trick again. So
oh, wow.
When Indy leaves her behind, he has really potentially made a real mess of this thing. And anything could happen at that point, I think. I don't know how conscious the audience is of it, but it's pretty interesting to have the main character make this choice that essentially raises the stakes and puts the leading lady in jeopardy. It's unusual.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're never going to fake out like that again. So if you see her in real peril, there's a good chance that this is it for old Marion.
Right. Yep.
That's a good
Nope,
point.
I totally, as an audience member, I totally was not aware of that. I think you're right, but I think it's made all the worse by the fact that he delivers this line and then he gives her a peck on the forehead. And the peck on the forehead is not the making out, smacking on her teeth that he was, just a moment before, right? It's very cruel. Actually, it's like, if you sit still, and I'll come back and get you, peck.
Yeah, Daddy's got this. You just
No, exactly. Daddy's got this. Because as I'm thinking about all this and hearing everybody talk about this, I'm thinking that I'm getting even sadder and sadder for Marion because she had a dad who dragged her all over the earth looking for his bits of junk, and she got hosed by that. And now Indy really, I keep thinking about this. I'm thinking, like, if you want to go to the grocery store as fast as you can, you find somebody to watch your kid. You like leave your kid at home in front of a video game, or you get your wife to watch him or something. You're like, if I don't take you with me, I can be out of here in a second, and I can just live my life, and I can wander down any aisle I want, and I can buy what I want, and it'll just be so easy. But if you come with me, it'll be a nightmare, and I wish I'd never been born.
Wow.
So he's
wow.
he's kind of doing that. By the way, I love my son. He's awesome. He's a little slow sometimes, and he's a little meandering. But no, I'm getting that sense of this, like, Jesus, Marion, can I just go and like get the ark, and then later I'll come back? You just sit here. You're not in like danger. You're inside. It's shady in here. You're okay. What's Bella gonna?
And yet, like you just said, guys, the stakes are really, really high. So he's acting like the stakes are lower, but actually the stakes are higher.
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, really, he's doubling down. So he's doing it's a big risk he's taking here with her. And obviously, the ethical question of leaving anyone in an imprisoned state at any point in time.
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
that's kind of rule number one of humanity, right? That we don't imprison people, enslave people, and we do anything we can to get people out of that situation if we're ethical people.
Do you think this is why I couldn't convince my friend the archaeologist to come on and be a guest?
You didn't want to get raked over the
anything
coals.
to do with it?
And by the way, let's not forget that Indy is knowingly leaving her with his arch nemesis, who he absolutely hates, and who there is nothing that Indy can possess or intentionally leave behind that Bella cannot take away.
And who has killed friends of Indy's previously in this movie?
That's true. Wait a minute, who did he
He's
kill?
amnestic.
Was Barranca a friend? Let's talk
Barranca
about
was
Barranca
definitely
some
not
more.
a friend. He was
No,
actually
he wasn't a friend.
He
He was a friend to archaeology.
for a minute.
Dr.
to history.
Am I
No.
wrong? Didn't he pull a gun on him?
He did.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Try convincing Pete of that, though. but then he leaves the tent finally. Are we all done with his reunion with Marion? I feel awkward and awful about it.
Yeah, we should move on. It's really sad.
We go outside into the sun where everything's okay.
Let's get to a happier scene where he's surveying an archaeological site.
Well, that is happier, yeah.
It
It
is.
is.
Well, I think there are. We've been talking a lot about this being Han Solo's fever dream while he's encased in carbonite. And I'd like to think that this movie starts with 2 new pieces of evidence, maybe 3 pieces of evidence that this is Han Solo's dream.
Really, Pete?
Do it.
Wait, are you talking about this particular minute has
This
3?
particular minute starts with 3
Wow.
different pieces of evidence.
I'm so excited.
Number 1, we have a literal trench run. We have diggers running through a trench. And then Indy, it cuts from that to Indy looking through the surveyor's level. And that looking through the scope looks very, very Star Wars. Like it's like Luke through the binoculars.
His macro binoculars, yeah.
Yeah. And number 3, while he's looking through the surveyor's level / scope, the camels in the background make sounds just like tauntauns.
They do.
They
actually.
do.
They do.
And they're
And
not
I'm
that different from Tusken Raiders. They sound a little bit
They
like
sound-
Tusken Raiders.
They sound a lot lot like the Tusken Raiders.
There
I'm
are two
assuming you've
banthas
also
down there.
pointed out that this archaeological dig is happening on Tatooine, right?
That's true.
I mean,
It's
they're
literally
basically shooting where Tatooine was.
Literally.
Well, yes.
That's just an overall like backdrop for the whole dream, I guess.
it's the biggest Easter egg in the entire movie. It takes up the
So
entire
big,
screen.
they didn't intend it at all.
Stop it, Christy. You're no Jerry.
No, I know it. I hear you.
I have talked before about how it's true of like Raiders and Star Wars and anything that I like fell deeply in love with as a kid. I'm still, even as an adult, partly watching it with my 10-year-old brain. And it wasn't until this viewing that I actually put together, like I got that he was surveying and trying to figure out where the Ark of the, or the where the Well of the Souls is, but that you can actually see that he's looking at the map room. And then he pans over to like a fallen pillar thing. I never recognized that as a pillar. I just thought it was like a weird like slab of rock or something. But it's a pillar that he saw in the map room. And then he pans over to like where the Well of Souls is.
One of the obelisks that stand right next to it in the map room.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I went
Oh, no, I
40
didn't
years.
even see that in this showing.
Yeah, see?
See? There you go.
Yeah, see? Yeah, like I was, as an audience member, I was perfectly fine with just glossing over the details of that and being like, okay, yeah, I get it. He's surveying and figuring out where it is. But they actually put those details in, which is
No, the
above and
details are
beyond.
spectacular all the way through this movie.
Yeah.
What if the Germans though had access to the map room, and they seem to think they knew where to dig. So I'm curious why they're digging in so many places.
I've always wondered that. They are everywhere.
Do you think they got frustrated when the initial based on the information they have, when the initial dig wasn't successful, they didn't just start shotgunning it and let's just dig all around here? Would they have eventually found the Well of Souls that they just kept?
Well, they weren't that far
No.
off. And,
No.
and really
true.
all they had to do was find that obelisk, apparently.
Yeah.
And just kind of, pointed right at it.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead, but yeah, like the way it sounds in the next minute or so that like maybe there's something to that they're kind of widening their net a little bit. But
The shotgunning, I think, is a good description because there are like 5 guys in the background who are just shoveling as fast as they can. Like they're just, you see dirt flying in the air and they're just shoveling as fast as they can go.
they're the best diggers in Egypt. But I was watching the scene for this and watching him survey and everything, and you get that nice moment of that's it. And as much as I like this scene, I do have to ask, do we need this scene in the movie?
I'm not sure if you need it. I think it's a bit of character, though. This is in my notes, actually. You get a little bit of character here for the first time because this is the first, I'm scanning back in my brain, the first time that he's gotten this close to an artifact he's seeking, right, since the opening sequence. Right? Am I wrong about that?
No, it seems right. Yeah.
So in the opening sequence in a lot of ways is its own little movie. We get who he is. We're getting an establishment of the world. We're getting the world building and so on. He's a little trepidatious and nervous, obviously, approaching the idol at the beginning. But here he's pretty sure he's figured out where the Ark of the Covenant is, which is way bigger than that idol ever was, for one thing, as far as a find. And he really takes a lot of glee in this moment. He gets a lot of joy. It's hinted at more, but you can see it's the first time he's gone. He gets this big smile on his face, and you see this. Not to get too far ahead, but you see this other times in the movie too. Mm-hmm. He really, really gets a kick out of all this. Yeah. And it's also very interesting that this is happening immediately after he just left his girlfriend in prison to get back to that. Yeah. Mitch and I were talking about this.
He's thinking maybe it was worth leaving her behind after all. I did the right thing.
There it is. And she's going to be so happy when I bring her this Ark. That's what he's thinking. Because
I think he just doesn't have a memory any longer than like 5 minutes. And because
possible.
We're doing this minute by minute, maybe 1 minute. So,
I think
I
if someone
agree
walked
with
up
that
and
to a
said,
certain extent. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was saying I agree with that to a certain extent. I think he does have he's so forward momentum oriented that I think that he doesn't really think a lot about what happened 5 minutes ago.
Or 5 steps ahead either. I mean, he's never really thinking far enough in ahead so he can anticipate what goes wrong, as it always does for him,
Right. That's why, in a way, it's kind of refreshing to see him taking out a precision instrument and applying some calculations that he's taken somewhere else and actually doing something clearly precise and planned out and intelligent and like carrying out a plan. That's kind of nice in contrast to a lot of the sort of haphazard, half-assed stuff he does a lot through the movie.
So we do need it.
I guess we do. I talked myself into it.
He's kind of weirdly measured and competent here, which we haven't seen a lot of.
That's true. That's true. He remembered his little scope. He brought it with him, right?
Did he? Or is that... I wonder if he just borrowed that from the Nazis.
Well, that could be too, I suppose.
He's also way out in the open as he does this. I'm wondering if anybody would think that was at all suspicious.
Well, that's kind of a problem with the whole darn, space we're in here. He's completely invisible. Completely invisible, this guy.
Well, he does have a turban on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And all you have to do is cover one eyeball, and your girlfriend of how many years, won't recognize you.
How many minutes?
How many minutes? That's right. One thing I was wondering about that scope was how many degrees of a circle is a kadam, right? Because he's looking at the ridge, and then he's going. I guess that question. He doesn't need to figure out how many degrees are in a kadam if he's got the obelisk, but he didn't know the obelisk was going to be there. Right? So he needed to try and figure out, looking at one place, which is clearly wrong because that's where the Nazis are. And then he moves over to another place where there are just 2 little diggers. And then he goes over to a place where there are no diggers. And I'm like, well, he must have been using his, I guess the Kadam's only, okay, I take this back because the Kadam's, all right, you're going to have to cut that one out,
Nope.
Kadam, because that makes no sense at all then.
Well, he
Right?
could do this all relatively. Like, he could have measured, the ratio to the obelisk to the map room to the Well of the Souls is 2 to 1 to 6. And then he could have measured, just from a relative distance. He could have said, okay, the distance from that point to the obelisk is, I'm going to make that 2, so I have to do 6 times that to get to the Well of the Souls.
But you do sort of wonder if he could have just picked out the one spot where nobody's digging, since he knows that they're digging in the wrong place.
So everywhere they are is got to be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd buy that. Sure.
That's archaeology.
It's archaeology. That's how it's done.
I was always really nervous that he was going to lose his spot, though, when he leans on the scope at the end.
I'm digging in the wrong place.
Well, there's something of an affordance of that telescope. It seems very convenient for him, and boy, it would be unfortunate if he moved it, messed it up somehow.
Well, he's got a mirror image to this in the next minute that I think is interesting, but I'll save that.
Okay. Well, if we're already talking about the next minute, maybe we should move on unless somebody has anything else.
That's it for me.
All right.
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool. Well, guys, why don't you tell us where everybody can find you and the Alien Minute, which is an excellent show.
We're at alienminute.com or at alienminutepod on Twitter. We're also at iTunes and the Stitcher app.
Awesome. And Pete, where can our people find our show when they're
You
not
can find
listening
us
to
at
Alien Minute?
IndianaJonesMinute.com. Check out our library there. We have lots of before and after pictures of some of the film locations. We have things that relate to what we're talking about at the movie. And check it out.
Awesome. Thank you all for an excellent minute of Raiders. And guys, you want to come back tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
That would be awesome. So we'll meet back here for minute 58 of Raiders of the Lost Ark here on the Indiana Jones Minute. We have to say Jones with a muzzle in our mouth or with a gag. Kirk!
God!
I was just about to do that.